December 24th, 1944. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Snow muffles everything. It clings to pine branches, piles against tank hulls, and softens the sound of engines that should be roaring. Beneath the white cover, mud freezes into rutted iron-hard tracks, cutting deep into the forest roads that snake west toward the Meuse River. Inside the steel belly of a Panzer IV, Hauptmann Otto Reinhardt, company commander of a German armored battalion, stares at his fuel gauge by the glow of a single red instrument light. The needle is sinking. Not fast, not dramatically, just steadily. He taps the glass with a gloved finger, as if that might help. "Farther," he says quietly to the driver. "How much farther?" The driver doesn't answer right away. He already knows the question behind the question. 20 kilometers, he finally says. Then, after a pause, maybe less. Outside, the engine idles with a low, uneven growl. Not the confident, mechanical thunder Reinhardt remembers from earlier in the war, but a strained, cautious sound, like an animal conserving energy. This is not how armored warfare is supposed to feel. 3 days earlier, the Germans had smashed into the American lines with surprise, speed, and force. Operation Wacht am Rhein, the Ardennes offensive, had begun exactly as planned. US units were caught off guard. Road junctions fell. Columns pushed west through fog and snow. For a moment, it felt like 1940 again. But now, on Christmas Eve, something is wrong. The radios crackle with half-formed reports. "Fuel convoy delayed. Refueling point not established. Hold position until further orders." Hold position. Reinhardt looks through his periscope at the narrow forest road ahead, clogged with German vehicles. Half-tracks, trucks, other tanks. All waiting, engines off. Crews huddled in coats and scarves, stamping their feet to keep warm. An armored spearhead, standing still. He remembers the doctrine drilled into him years ago. Panzer forces live on momentum. Stop them, and they die. Keep them moving, and they shatter armies. So why are they waiting? Further back along the column, a Panther tank has already gone silent. Its crew sits on the hull, helmets off, breath fogging in the cold. One of them laughs bitterly. "Ran out," he calls to no one in particular. No enemy fire. No mechanical breakdown. Just empty tanks. Reinhardt feels a knot tighten in his stomach. Fuel shortages are not new. He has lived with them since 1942. Rations cut, training hours reduced, vehicles cannibalized to keep others running. But this is different. This is the offensive itself starving. What Reinhardt does not yet fully grasp, what none of them want to say aloud, is that this battle was planned on a gamble, that the Americans would collapse before German fuel stocks did, and that gamble is already failing. Earlier that morning, a staff officer had passed down the line, voice low, eyes avoiding contact. "The fuel dumps near Prüm were hit again last night." No explanation needed. Everyone knows what that means. Allied fighter bombers, P-47 Thunderbolts, Typhoons, have been roaming freely whenever the weather clears, hunting rail yards, convoys, refineries. Germany's synthetic fuel plants, once the heart of its war economy, have been smashed again and again. Production numbers look acceptable on paper, but paper doesn't move tanks. Every liter that reaches the front has survived a gauntlet of bomb craters, broken rails, destroyed bridges, and burning trucks. Every drop is contested. Reinhardt opens his hatch and climbs halfway out, scanning the road. He sees something that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. German tank commanders walking, not inspecting, not directing. Walking from vehicle to vehicle, asking the same question. Do you have fuel? Sometimes the answer is yes. Often it is no. Occasionally, a desperate solution is attempted. Siphoning from a disabled vehicle, pouring freezing gasoline from jerry cans with numb fingers, spilling precious fuel into the snow. It buys minutes, not victory. From the east, the distant rumble of artillery echoes through the forest. Somewhere, Americans are regrouping. Somewhere their own fuel trucks are still moving. Reinhardt closes his eyes for a moment. For the first time in the war, it is not enemy fire he fears. It is time. And time, he realizes, no longer belongs to Germany. June 12, 1944. Leuna Works, near Meersburg, Germany. The bombs arrive before the sirens finish. Oberingenieur Karl-Heinz Bauer is already running when the first explosions tear through the hydrogenation plant, the concussion slamming him against a concrete wall hard enough to knock the breath from his lungs. The air fills instantly with dust, steam, and the sharp chemical bite of ruptured pipelines. Above him, the sky roars. Not flak, not fighters, bombers, hundreds of them. Bauer forces himself upright and looks toward the processing towers, the heart of Germany's synthetic fuel production. Flames are licking up steel columns that should never burn. Gauges spin wildly. Valves scream as pressure escapes where it was never meant to. This is not an attack on a factory. This is an attack on motion itself. For years, German planners had known fuel was a vulnerability. Germany had little natural oil, relying instead on synthetic fuel plants like Leuna, Perlitz, and Blechhammer, sprawling, complex facilities that converted coal into gasoline through intricate chemical processes. They were engineering miracles. They were also fragile. Every step required precision. Every disruption cascaded. Every repair took time, skilled labor, and uninterrupted power. Early in the war, these plants had been spared. Allied bombers focused on cities, ports, aircraft factories. Fuel was discussed, but not prioritized. That changed in 1944. Bauer stumbles through the plant, shouting orders that are barely audible over the thunder. Fire crews scramble, but water pressure drops as pumps fail. Electrical lines are gone. Control rooms are wrecked. This is not something you fix overnight. By midday, Luna is a ruin of twisted steel and burning coal gas. By evening, Germany has lost tens of thousands of tons of future fuel, fuel that will never reach Keller's Panther or any other tank, aircraft, or truck at the front. And this time, there will be no quick recovery. The shift is deliberate. Allied planners, guided by intelligence analysts and economic warfare specialists, have come to a conclusion as cold as it is devastating. You do not need to destroy the enemy's weapons. You need to destroy what makes them move. From spring 1944 onward, fuel becomes the target. Refineries, synthetic plants, storage depots, rail junctions feeding them. The attacks are relentless, repeated, systematic. A plant that begins repairs is hit again. Rail lines are bombed, repaired, bombed again. Fuel tank farms erupt into firestorms visible for miles. Germany's response is desperate improvisation. Back in Normandy, Keller receives his first fuel ration in days. It is not enough. Instead of filling tanks, crews are ordered to distribute fuel by priority. One platoon moves, another stays still. Engines are run just long enough to reposition, then shut down again. Panzer commanders begin planning attacks around fuel availability rather than tactical opportunity. Advance 2 kilometers. Hold engines cold. Withdraw only if absolutely necessary. The language of armored warfare changes. Mobility, once assumed, is now rationed like ammunition. Worse still, the Luftwaffe begins to vanish. Not shot down in great numbers, but grounded. Fighter units report aircraft ready but unfueled. Pilot training hours are slashed. Reconnaissance flights are cancelled. Without air cover, German armor becomes visible, and visibility is death. American fighter bombers range freely now. Prowling roads, rail lines, and idle vehicles. A panther that moves attracts attention. One that stays still becomes a landmark. Keller watches a neighboring unit attempt to relocate under cover of clouds. They get 1 kilometer. Then the Jabos arrive. Explosions bracket the road. One tank burns. Another throws a track trying to evade. The survivors shut down engines again. Fuel saved. Men lost. The collapse is not sudden. It is suffocating. Germany's armored force is not defeated in a single battle. It is immobilized piece by piece, day by day, by a logistical strangulation that tank crews can feel but not see. Berlin continues to issue orders that assume fuel will exist. The front continues to plan offensives that cannot be supplied. Commanders begin lying, reporting fuel levels that are theoretical rather than real, hoping something will change before reality catches up. It does not. At Luna, Bauer oversees repairs under constant threat. Workers labor among ruins. Replacement parts are scavenged from other plants. Production restarts briefly, at a fraction of capacity. Then the bombers return, again and again. By late summer 1944, synthetic fuel output has collapsed by more than half. By autumn, it is catastrophic. The realization hits the front slowly, then all at once. German tank commanders are not losing because they are outnumbered. They are losing because their tanks are becoming stationary targets. A Panther without fuel is not a threat. It is a liability, and the enemy knows it. One evening, Keller listens to a divisional briefing crackle over the radio. The officer's voice is controlled, almost calm. Fuel deliveries will be irregular. Units are to prioritize defensive positions. Offensive maneuver is no longer feasible without explicit authorization. Offensive maneuver. The phrase sounds archaic now. Like cavalry charges, like another war. Keller switches off the radio and sits in silence beside his tank. For the first time, he understands that the war is no longer being decided by men like him. It is being decided far from the front, by bombers he cannot see, engineers he will never meet, and pipelines that no longer carry what they once did. The tank has not failed him. The system behind it has. December 16th, 1944, Ardennes Forest, Belgium. The snow is falling hard enough to swallow sound. Hauptmann Otto Keller stands ankle-deep in slush beside his Panther, breath fogging in the frozen air as mechanics work by lantern light. The forest is quiet in a way that feels unnatural. No aircraft, no artillery, no engines idling in the distance. Silence, Keller knows, is fuel. Every drop has been hoarded for this moment. Operation Wacht am Rhein, the Ardennes offensive, is supposed to change everything. One last armored thrust, one last gamble to split the Allied front, capture fuel depots, and reverse the course of the war. For the first time in months, Keller's tank is full, or close enough. The plan is brutally simple. Break through the thin American lines. Drive hard. Seize Allied fuel stocks intact. Let captured gasoline replace what Germany can no longer produce. German tank commanders do not ask whether this is sustainable. They ask only whether it might work fast enough. Because speed is the last remaining weapon. At dawn, engines roar to life across the forest. Panthers, tigers, half-tracks, trucks, all moving at once, burning fuel at a rate Germany can no longer afford. The ground trembles. Snow sprays from treads. For a brief, intoxicating moment, it feels like 1941 again. Momentum returns. American units are surprised. Roads clog. Villages fall. Fuel dumps are overrun. Keller's battalion pushes westward, radio chatter alive with excitement and disbelief. They are moving, but movement consumes fuel. Relentlessly. By the second day, the cracks appear. Columns slow as vehicles fall out with mechanical failures that cannot be repaired quickly in the cold. Fuel trucks lag behind. Bridges choke with traffic. Orders pile up faster than they can be executed. Then the weather clears, and the sky belongs to the Allies again. American fighter bombers descend on the roads like birds of prey. Vehicles scatter. Convoys burn. Fuel trucks, precious, irreplaceable, explode in towering plumes of flame. A single strafing run erases days of planning. Keller's unit receives orders to bypass resistance and continue west. They cannot. They are nearly dry. By December 20th, Keller's Panther is down to fumes. The engine coughs. The needle trembles near empty. The radio brings a message he already expects. Fuel resupply delayed. Hold position. Hold position. In an offensive. In winter. Against an enemy with air superiority and unlimited fuel. Keller laughs once. Sharply, then stops himself. He has seen this before. Normandy. France. Now here. Different terrain. Same ending. Nearby a Tiger II sits abandoned at the roadside, its crew gone on foot. Another Panther has been blown by its own men. Demolition charges placed carefully to deny the enemy a trophy. German armor is not being destroyed in battle. It is being erased by logistics. When American forces counterattack, they do so methodically. They do not rush. They probe. They isolate. They wait for the German units to stall, because they know they will. A German tank that cannot maneuver is predictable. A predictable tank is dead. Keller receives the final order on December 24th. Withdraw east. Abandon vehicles that cannot be moved. Save crews. Save what little fuel remains. The offensive is over. Not defeated tactically. Exhausted. As Keller's crew drains the last usable fuel from their Panther into cans, he runs his hand along the cold steel of the turret. This machine was built to dominate battlefields. It never lost a duel. It never broke down in combat. It simply ran out of the one thing Germany could no longer give it. The Ardennes offensive will later be described as Germany's last gamble. What is less often said is why it had to be a gamble at all. Because Germany no longer had the fuel for certainty. Every attack required theft. Every success depended on capturing what the enemy already possessed. Every failure was irreversible. That is not strategy. That is desperation. In January 1945, Allied bombing resumes with renewed focus. What remains of Germany's synthetic fuel network is smashed again and again. Railways feeding it are severed. Storage tanks burn. By February, many German armored units exist only on paper. They have tanks. They have crews. They have orders. They do not have fuel. Keller and his men retreat on foot through snow-covered forests, passing rows of abandoned vehicles half buried in ice. Panthers, tigers, half-tracks, silent monuments to an army that could no longer move. For years, German tank doctrine had emphasized speed, shock, decisive maneuver. Now the doctrine collapses under its own assumptions. An armored force that cannot move is not armored. It is trapped. Keller understands the truth before Berlin does. The war is no longer about winning battles. It is about who can still move when the shooting stops, and Germany cannot. February 3rd, 1945. Near Cologne, Germany. The Rhine lies ahead like a promise Germany can no longer keep. Hauptmann Otto Keller watches from the edge of a ruined village as American armor advances cautiously along a frozen road. Shermans move in short bounds, engines idling low, fuel trucks never far behind. When they stop by choice. That distinction matters now. Keller's unit no longer retreats by design. It drifts, pulled backward by shortages, orders arriving too late, movements dictated by what little fuel remains rather than by terrain or enemy intent. The front is no longer a line. It is a series of immobile clusters. In theory, Germany still has armored divisions. On paper, they are formidable. Panthers, Tigers, assault guns. Veteran crews hardened by years of combat. But in reality, most formations can move only a few kilometers at a time before commanders must decide whether to halt, abandon vehicles, or gamble everything on reaching the next fuel delivery. Those deliveries rarely arrive. The reason is no longer mysterious. By early 1945, Germany's fuel crisis is absolute. Synthetic plants that once converted coal into aviation fuel and gasoline operate at a fraction of capacity, when they operate at all. Allied bombers return again and again, hitting the same facilities not for dramatic effect, but to ensure repairs never catch up. Rail lines feeding the plants are severed. Storage depots are destroyed. Transport units are hunted relentlessly from the air. Fuel does not just run low. It disappears. At divisional headquarters, maps are now overlaid with fuel calculations. Not arrows of advance. Not objectives. Numbers. How far can we move? How long can we idle? How many tanks can be fueled today? Commanders begin rotating which vehicles receive fuel, keeping a handful mobile while others sit silent, cannibalized for parts, stripped down like carcasses. Mobility is rationed. Keller experiences this firsthand. His battalion receives fuel sufficient for a single maneuver, one push to a new defensive line west of the Rhine. There will be no repositioning afterward. One move, one chance. They wait for night. The engines start quietly, crews holding their breath as if noise itself consumes fuel. The column crawls forward, headlights blacked out, drivers navigating by memory, and faint reflections in the snow. Every kilometer feels expensive. Every wrong turn is unforgivable. They reach the line just before dawn. Fuel gauges hover near empty. There is no margin left. When American artillery begins probing later that morning, Keller has no ability to counterattack, redeploy, or withdraw. His tanks can fire. They cannot maneuver. American commanders recognize this pattern immediately. They have seen it since Normandy. German armor no longer behaves like armor. It does not strike. It does not exploit. It reacts slowly. And reaction consumes fuel Germany does not have. By March 1945, entire German armored formations surrender with their vehicles intact. Not because they are surrounded, because they are dry. Crews destroy optics, breach guns, smash radios, then walk away. Hands raised, uniforms stained with oil and exhaustion. American soldiers will later remark how strange it is to capture tanks without fighting them. They look lethal. They simply cannot go anywhere. Keller's last Panther never fires another shot. On March 7th, near Remagen, its engine dies during a relocation order. Fuel exhausted. No resupply expected. No point waiting. Keller orders demolition charges placed carefully, just as he has been trained. When the explosion comes, it is muffled by distance and snow. Another tank erased without being defeated. That night, Keller sits with his crew in a farmhouse cellar, listening to distant artillery and the hum of American engines that never seem to stop. One of his men asks quietly, "Herr Hauptmann, did we lose because we ran out of fuel?" Keller does not answer immediately, because the truth is larger than fuel. Germany did not simply lose gasoline. It lost the ability to choose. Every operation became a gamble because reserves no longer existed. Every success had to pay for itself immediately. Every pause became fatal. An army designed around maneuver cannot survive without movement. And by 1945, Germany's army is static, not by doctrine, but by necessity. When Keller finally surrenders in April, he notices something that stays with him long after the war. American units are worn, damaged, but they are never immobile. Fuel trucks roll forward even as artillery fires. Damaged tanks are recovered, repaired, returned. Operations pause only when commanders decide to pause. Movement is assumed. Germany had once stunned the world with armored warfare. Now its commanders are stunned by something far simpler. They ran out first, not of courage, not of machines, not of men, but of the fuel that made all of it matter. April 16th, 1945. Eastern Front, outside Berlin. The ground shakes constantly now, not from maneuver, but from bombardment. Oberstleutnant Friedrich Lang stands beside the wreck of what was once a Panther tank. Its turret intact, its tracks unbroken, its engine caught. There is no visible damage, no penetration, no fire scars, it simply stopped. Out of fuel. Lang has commanded armored units since Poland. He had learned war as motion. Advance, exploit, encircle, withdraw, strike again. Even in retreat, there had once been rhythm. Now there is only inertia. Berlin is days away from collapse, but the tank losses begin long before the city is reached. Columns stall on roads choked with refugees. Engines are shut down to conserve the last liters of fuel. Crews are ordered to wait, then ordered again, then forgotten. Fuel convoys no longer exist as formations. They are rumors. Lang's unit receives priority allocation for one final counterattack, an attempt to delay Soviet armor pushing west. The fuel allotment is precise to the kilometer. No reserves, no contingency. Maps are drawn with rulers, not tactics. The attack fails before it begins. Half the tanks never reach the start line. By now, even the soldiers understand what their commanders hesitate to say aloud. This is no longer a military defeat unfolding. It is an arithmetic one. Germany's fuel crisis is total. Romanian oil fields are gone. Synthetic plants lie in ruins. Railways are shattered. Road movement by daylight is suicidal. The Reich can still manufacture tanks in factories and assemble aircraft in tunnels, but it cannot move them in meaningful numbers. Power without motion, mass without reach. Allied intelligence officers will later note the irony. Germany built some of the most technically sophisticated armored vehicles of the war, but designed its war economy as if fuel would always be available. America and Britain, by contrast, design everything backward from logistics. Engines that tolerate lower-grade fuel. Vehicles standardized to simplify supply. Enormous fuel depots protected as strategic assets. Entire air campaigns dedicated not to armies, but to refineries, pipelines, rail yards. The Germans had protected factories. The Allies had protected flow. By late April, Lang receives orders that no longer pretend to be operational. Hold where you are. Delay. Fight to the last. None of them mention movement. None of them mention fuel. Everyone already knows. When Soviet armor finally reaches Lang's position, the engagement is brief. German tanks fire from static positions like concrete bunkers. Once flanked, they cannot reposition. Once surrounded, they cannot escape. Lang orders his crews to destroy what remains, not because they are defeated tactically, but because they are finished mechanically. In the ruins of Berlin, captured German officers will speak candidly for the first time. We could still fight, one says. We just couldn't move. That sentence appears again and again in post-war interrogations. Not we were outnumbered. Not we were betrayed. Not we lacked courage. We were dry. When the war ends, Allied analysts piece together the timeline. Germany's armored forces were strategically defeated months before surrender. Not at Kursk, not in Normandy, not in the Ardennes, but in the skies above fuel plants, on rail lines feeding refineries, on roads where tankers burned before reaching the front. The tank commanders had not lost their skill. They had lost their engine. Hauptmann Otto Keller, now a prisoner, is asked during debriefing what surprised him most in the final year of the war. He does not mention enemy tanks, or aircraft, or artillery, he answers simply. That they always had fuel. In modern war, firepower decides battles, but logistics decides wars. Germany's tank commanders were stunned, not because the Allies outfought them tactically, but because the war they understood required something Germany could no longer supply: motion, choice, the ability to act instead of react. When that vanished, defeat followed, inevitably, quietly, and long before the final shots were fired.